Welcome back to more of CNN Live Today. I'm Kira Phillips here at the CNN headquarters in Atlanta. As we're reporting, the government is placing Americans on a higher state of alert for possible attacks by terrorists. We're going to go quickly to Washington and CNN Justice correspondent Kelly Arena. She's been working the developing story. What can you tell us, Kelly?
Well, Kira, the bottom line here is that the threat of a terrorist attack against U.S. targets is increasing. Government officials say that the threat level, as monitored by the Homeland Security Office, will move from yellow to orange. Now that signifies a high risk of attack, and it is the first time that the level of alert has changed since the system was introduced in March. Now sources tell CNN that there is specific and credible information that led to the change, and that it involves American targets overseas, primarily in Southeast Asia. We do expect more information from the Attorney General, the FBI Director, and the Homeland Security Director just in moments from now. Now, several U.S. embassies and consulates have been ordered closed for parts of this week. Those include facilities in Malaysia and Indonesia, Pakistan, Vietnam, Cambodia, and Bahrain. Now, CNN has reported that there has been increased information, so-called intelligence chatter, that has been intercepted. Officials have compared it to the levels that were experienced the same time last year and again around the July 4th holiday. And while officials say that there is no specific information about a threat on U.S. soil, they are elevating the domestic threat level out of a so-called abundance of caution. Now, it's important to remember the information that came in last year at this time also pointed to an overseas threat, not a domestic attack, but yet we did unfortunately go through a domestic attack, and that is why we are seeing the domestic threat level rise up a notch, Kira.
Kelly, talk to us about intelligence chatter. You and John King and everyone has been talking about that. I'm a bit familiar with it, but could you get a little more in depth and tell us exactly what that means and how that intelligence chatter is honed in on?
Right. Well, basically, this is information picked up by the intelligence community through a variety of means: satellites, intercepts, conversations, human intelligence, and so forth. So from a variety of means, you're getting an increased level of information coming in. Some of it is corroborated, some of it is familiar, talking about, it's just the same sense of intensity. And so that information coming in from a variety of sources, whether here in the United States, overseas, various places, causes the intelligence community to assume, because of this level of information, that something's up, that either an attack is being planned, that attack could be underway. Unfortunately, that intelligence that has been gathered has not been specific as to a target. At least that was what we were hearing up until the end of last week. Now what we're hearing is that there is specific and credible information coming in from those variety of sources, pointing to Southeast Asia, pointing to U.S. targets in Southeast Asia. That and a variety of other reasons, just the anniversary of September 11th itself has led to the closing of some U.S. facilities in that area, as we talked about before, and has also led investigators to argue for the raising of the threat level here in the United States. The thing that's important to remember here is that there's been no specific and credible information about a U.S. target, something happening here on U.S. soil. The thing that has investigators, though, concerned is that that's what we were hearing the same time last year, that there was not U.S. soil was not threatened, that it was a U.S. target overseas, and yet we did see the horrific events of September 11th. And so what you're getting now is increased vigilance here on U.S. soil as well.
All right, our Kelly Arena there, Justice correspondent. Thanks so much, Kelly. Great information. Someone else following on this note of intelligence chatter and the security risks overseas and here in the United States, of course, our John King at the White House working the story from there. John, what do you know?
Kira, we are told the president personally approved raising the threat level assessment from elevated to high here in the United States at a meeting this morning with his top national security team. That was a follow-up meeting to a session here last night at which we are told CIA Director George Tenet told the president and other senior officials around the table that there was no question in his mind that a great deal of this so-called chatter, as you were discussing with Kelly Arena, was coming directly from the Al-Qaeda network. As Kelly said, that where the information is specific, it is directed at threats against U.S. facilities overseas, but there has been, we are told, some discussion in these conversations, monitored, intercepted, by terrorists and suspected terrorists some discussion about the September 11th anniversary and the plans for commemorative events across the United States. U.S. officials stressed that they believe this is what they call circular reporting. When we at CNN say security has been increased at the Golden Gate Bridge, in the next few days you hear conversations in this group that is closely monitored by the intelligence community about security at the Golden Gate Bridge. So U.S. officials say no specific threats here in the United States, but they describe this conversation, this briefing by the CIA director last night, as the, quote, tipping point, convincing the president that out of an abundance of caution, he should approve the increase in the threat level assessment from elevated to high. We will get the details on that in just a few minutes. And because of this, this is one of the reasons we are told the vice president's routine has been changed. It was decided at that very same meeting last night, Mr. Cheney would not go out to a public event and accompany the president to a concert here in Washington. Instead, he spent the night at a secure location outside of Washington. Look for more of that over the next several days. Officials said they don't want to alarm anybody, but they feel it is their responsibility to put the public on alert and to take extra precautions when it comes to the president and the vice president. Here.
John, when talking about flow of information, as intelligence sources are listening to this intelligence chatter, and if indeed something comes across and they can confirm that there is a target that's being talked about here in the United States, how quickly do we all find out about that?
Well, we have learned a great deal about this, in part due to the extraordinary reporting of our own team, especially David Enser in the past year, about the National Security Agency actually having recordings in its hands about some of the September 11th attacks, but not being able to translate them until after the attacks. You can be clear this administration insists it now moves much more quickly, that it has more people involved, that the priority has been placed on overseas terrorism and domestic terrorism as opposed to other law enforcement investigations. The administration says it can act very quickly and says that this is an example of that the CIA director, this has been a concern, Kira, for several weeks. They have been discussing the planning for the anniversary. They have been discussing a recent uptick. We had one around the July 4th period. We have had another uptick in the past 2 weeks in this so-called chatter. We are told when the CIA director came here last night with new, credible information drawing a direct line back to Al-Qaeda, that the president decided to act quickly, and that in fact that was evidence that the CIA and other intelligence agencies are able to process this information much more quickly.
John, you've refreshed my memory and you bring up a really good point, and that was the report that David Enser did bring to us about those tapes, about the intelligence chatter, and that there was talk about September 11th, but it did not get translated in time, unfortunately. How have systems changed since David came out with that report, and the buzzword was there had to be a system in place to make translating a quicker process? Indeed, has that happened?
They have changed in a number of ways that we can see with the naked eye. This very color-coded chart that we have about the threat level here at home, that was put in place by the Office of Homeland Security. The president has asked for a new Department of Homeland Security. He also has retasked the Federal Bureau of Investigation to make its #1 priority, not white-collar crime as it was on September 10th of last year, but fighting and winning the war on terrorism here at home in the United States. We have been told there's more money for the CIA. Now, much of the CIA's budget, the National Security Agency's budget, the military's intelligence budget, much of that is classified. We do not know what it is being spent on, but we are told billions more being put into that, more people being hired, and from the top, from CIA Director Tenet and others, a priority being placed on processing any information about the terrorist threat before you might get to any other areas of interest, and there are many: business, corporate interests, other economic espionage, if you will, that goes on around the world. Terrorism is priority one, and we are told that the government is much better at it. We don't get to see it because so much of it is classified and out of our range of vision.
Understandably. Now, John, I'm hearing the choppers overhead. Is this a part of increased security, or is that possibly just a news chopper?
No news choppers allowed in the airspace around the White House, Kira. We noticed that chopper just a few minutes ago ourselves. It's very rare to have a police chopper up in the area over the White House. I would view this as a routine precaution, though the president is due to leave the White House about an hour from now for an event here in Washington. When the president's motorcade is to be on the streets of Washington, oftentimes you do see some increased surveillance of the area. In fact, the security perimeter around the White House has been stretched out a bit in recent weeks, so we'll have to get a specific answer, but I would draw the line to the fact that the president is going out in public in his motorcade in just a short time.
John King at the White House. Thanks so much, John. Gene Meserve also on top of this story as we are learning more about the government's terror alert code being stepped up from yellow to orange, from elevated to high. Gene, what do you have?
Kara, Governor Ridge spoke a short time ago with the nation's governors and with their Homeland Security directors. I have spoken with someone familiar with those conversations, and this is what they tell me. That new intelligence was gathered last evening. It was analyzed overnight. It related to specific threats in Southeast Asia. They believe that there were direct links between al-Qaeda and these threats, which were made on Department of Defense and State Department related facilities. This would track with what we're hearing from the State Department, that they are closing embassies in that part of the world, the one in Jakarta closing today. The chatter, this official tells me, also indicated the potential for a second concern about suicide attacks in a second undisclosed part of the world. In this conversation, Ridge said there was no specific and credible information relating to any attacks here in the U.S. But given all of this, they felt it was prudent to raise the threat level across the board. They have information, according to this conversation, according to what was given to the governors today, that al-Qaeda is in operational mode similar to what it was before September 11th. And based on the similarities in the patterns, another reason for deciding to raise this threat alert status from yellow to orange. The governors were not given a specific list of things they had to do. Nothing was mandated. However, they were given some prescriptive measures for their consideration. They were recommended that they might limit access to certain kinds of facilities, enforce access ID cards and stuff like that. According to the individual who I spoke to, further guidance is expected from the Office of Homeland Security shortly. They expect sometime this afternoon, that being given to the governors and their Homeland Security directors. So once again, the specifics of this threat, apparently one has been received that appears to be linked to al-Qaeda, that poses a threat to Department of Defense and State Department facilities in Southeast Asia, and then a second indication that there was potential for suicide attacks in some second undisclosed part of the world. Kira, back to you.
All right, and Jean, this 1:15, I guess about 1:15, we're going to go to this news conference at the Justice Department, and is that where we're going to find out specifically what all of us as Americans need to be doing? We've been talking about what the government is doing, where the Vice President, he's been taking into a secret and secure area, but we want to, of course, all of us want to know what we should all be doing in the moments leading up to September 11th, and talking about this increase in the terror code.
I'm sure there will be something said about that. We probably got the headline from Ari Fleischer, the White House spokesman, when he briefed earlier today. His recommendation was that Americans continue to go around their business. I would suspect we will also hear that Americans should be more vigilant. If the information that I've been receiving is correct, these threats are overseas. They do not appear to be domestic. Nonetheless, given the significance of the date, I'm sure they'll advise every one of us to be on our toes and on the lookout. Kira?
All right, Jean Meserve out of Washington. Thanks, Jean. Now, as we're reporting, the government is placing Americans on a high state of alert for possible attack by terrorists. The system established in March is being moved from yellow to orange, meaning a greater risk of attack. And we've also been reporting that U.S. warplanes will be patrolling the skies of several big cities tomorrow, including New York. And that's where we find our Jason Carroll. He's there and has been talking to people at the UN and will bring us more on security and precautions being taken. Jason.
Well, Kira, I know now that the rest of the country is now on an orange alert, but it's important to point out that New York City has actually been on an orange alert since September 11th. The thinking being that this is the type of city that just simply presents a higher security risk. So in terms of added security, the New York City Police Department has basically been working on that and enacting that for almost a year now. Special attention will obviously be paid to the United Nations. The FBI alert did say that the United Nations represents a potentially attractive target for terrorists. The reason being a number of dignitaries are going to be here throughout the week for the General Assembly. President Bush will be speaking here on Thursday. The NYPD will definitely be focusing much of their attention here, according to Police Commissioner Ray Kelly. They'll also be monitoring the city's national landmarks, religious institutions, as well as the city's bridges and tunnels. We're being told that what they're planning to do is hold random security checks at the various bridges and tunnels throughout the area. Yesterday, I did have an opportunity to speak with New York City Police Commissioner Ray Kelly, and he says that basically the city is prepared.
We've done a lot of training. We'll be doing more training. We've done a lot of training. We've got the equipment. We're working more closely with federal authorities, with other state and local agencies to prepare for another event if, God forbid, it does happen.
Kelly also points out that New York City safely hosted several large-scale events, the NFL concert in Times Square last week, the U.S. Open, as well as the special session of Congress, and he says that his department is ready for tomorrow's ceremonies. Kira?
Jason, I want to ask you too about the waters. I know you had a chance to talk with the scuba divers on the NYPD scuba unit. Also, Patty Davis talked about the Coast Guard heightening their training and their activity. What can you tell us about protecting the waters and, of course, boats, etc.?
Well, what they'll be doing is they'll be patrolling various harbors and ports throughout the city. They started doing that yesterday. They'd been doing it the week before. The way that New York is sort of laid out, much of the ceremonies are going to be happening downtown Manhattan. There'll be many people near the water, so what they're going to be doing is patrolling some of the various ports, some of the docks in the area, looking for anything that might be suspicious. But again, I want to point out, New York City has been on an orange alert for almost a year now. It'll be a year tomorrow. And so they've been actively involved with doing things like that for several months.
All right, our Jason Carroll there in front of the UN in New York. Thanks so much, Jason. Once again, we want to remind all of you that we are waiting for that news conference out of the Justice Department. As soon as it happens, we'll bring it to you. Homeland Security Director Tom Ridge, also FBI Director Robert Mueller, and Attorney General John Ashcroft will be addressing all of us about the security concerns now and leading up to September 11th, as we have just learned that the government's terror alert code has been stepped up from yellow to orange. That is elevated to high.
It has a sleek all-in-one design like the Apple iMac computer, only it's faster, has more storage capacity, and can run thousands more software programs. Presenting the remarkable new Gateway Profile 4. Oh, and by the way, did we mention the Gateway Profile costs less than the iMac?
I only have one dad. He's a great guy, an active guy. But as a result of his diabetes, he developed a wound that just wouldn't heal. He said he could live with it, but I couldn't.
The Wound Care Center can help. We use advanced techniques and therapies you just can't find anywhere else.
You should have seen his face when he walked in the door.
For the Wound Care Center nearest you, call 1-800-64-WOUND.
Once again, we are waiting for that news conference out of the Justice Department about the terror alert code being stepped up from yellow to orange. We're back in 75 seconds.
When your eyes feel dry, irritated, there's Refresh brand eye drops. First, Refresh relieves and soothes, then forms a lasting shield of protection to keep irritation out and moisture in. #1 doctor recommended Refresh relieves and protects.
Too many high-interest monthly payments? Why not pay them off with a second mortgage with a no-closing cost option from Ditech.com? Apply online now or call us at 1-800-71-FIX. And there is no equity required. Ditech Second Mortgage with a no-closing cost option can help you to consolidate your high-interest debts into one low monthly payment. Ditech.com, your 24/7 mortgage solution. Apply online or call us at 1-800-71-FIX.
Tonight on CNN Primetime at 8, what did Osama bin Laden do on September 11th? In a CNN exclusive, his disturbing reaction to the attacks as they happened. Then, 1 year later, are we any closer to catching the terrorists? An hour with John Walsh of America's Most Wanted on Larry King Live at 9. And at 10, 5 lives, 5 families touched by 9/11. We follow them through an emotional year on Newsnight. Connie Chung, Larry King, Aaron Brown, beginning at 8 Eastern. It's all part of CNN Primetime tonight.
If you're just tuning in to CNN, we're following breaking news now that the news that we've been reporting is that the government is placing Americans on a higher state of alert for possible attacks by terrorists. We have been moved from elevated to high. That's just one step underneath severe, the highest that you can go on the Homeland Security Advisory System. We will have more on what this means for all of you as soon as a news conference happens out of the Justice Department. We are waiting for that. We are moments away from that. Standing by live, home Homeland Security Director Tom Ridge, FBI Director Robert Mueller, also Attorney General John Ashcroft will be speaking to Americans about what this means about our security starting right now as we approach September 11th, just 1 year after those terror attacks on our country. Along with the heightened state of alert prior to the September 11th observances, security has been tightened at U.S. airports and in the nation's coastal waters. We've all seen it, we've all felt it, and CNN's Patty Davis is at Washington's Reagan National Airport with more as this terror code alert is bumped up a level. Patty.
Well, Kira, in response to this threat, the Transportation Department, a spokesman saying that the department has put all of its federal air marshals on the job. They are on both domestic and international flights. Now, in addition, U.S. airports are working closely, more closely than ever, with local and state law enforcement. And the Transportation Security Administration, federal passenger screeners are even on a heightened alert as well. They are looking more closely at passengers, at bags. Transportation Department also says that the U.S. Coast Guard has heightened its alert status as well. Now, although this threat appears to be at U.S. interests overseas, the Department of Transportation is saying that they are taking an abundance of caution here, and they are raising the alert status at airports around the country. Kira?
Patty, as you talk about all the air marshals being deployed, are you able to talk about this, or is this confidential? How many air marshals? How do they pick the flights? Usually what type of flights these air marshals are on?
Well, that is something that's kept very close to the vest by the Transportation Security Department. It has been reported, however, that the number is in the thousands and it continues to grow. But normally they would be rotated as any regular shift would through various flights throughout the week and things like that. But the Transportation Security Administration, the DOT, today saying that all of them are now on duty because of this threat. Kira?
Patty Davis at Washington's Reagan National Airport. Thank you, Patty. And I'm being told now that the news conference we're expecting from the Justice Department about this terror alert code being elevated from yellow to orange, now in high alert. It has been pushed to 1:30 Eastern Time. That's going to be with Attorney General John Ashcroft, Homeland Security Director Tom Ridge, and also FBI Director Robert Mueller. If you are concerned about September 11th, if you have questions about your security, you're going to want to tune in to this news conference, because the fact that the government has moved the terror alert code from yellow to orange is a huge deal. It's just one step under severe, the highest that you can go with regard to these terror alerts. So stay tuned. 1:30 Eastern Time, we will bring this news conference to you live. Now, after September 11th, it was widely assumed that the nation and its people would be forever changed. And 1 year later, there are a number of ways to measure that theory. One is to turn to Frank Newport. He's editor-in-chief of the Gallup poll. Hi, Frank. Great to see you. What did you find?
Well, Kira, I don't think that the kind of alert that we're seeing today is going to have a dramatic effect on Americans' feelings about how they live their daily life. Now, why do I say that? Well, first of all, we've asked Americans. They've been living under a threat now for 1 year of other terrorist attacks. We said, have you changed profoundly the way that you live your daily life? And only 18%. In polling distance, that's a pretty small number. Only 18% of Americans say they've really changed the way they live their lives. Now, here's the point. When we've asked Americans about how worried they are personally that they'll be the victim of a terrorist attack, obviously these data were collected a few days ago, not after the alert that we've just been hearing about over the last hour. We had that big bump up to 58% right after September 11th. But since then, it's been about a third or a little more who say that they are very or somewhat worried. And actually, that's not all that much higher than we had prior to 9/11. Kira, a couple of points here. Americans have all along felt that there might be other terrorist attacks. That's why I say I don't think the alert is necessarily going to come as a great surprise to Americans. 80% or even more in our recent polls said they thought there were al-Qaeda operatives in the U.S. capable of doing or perpetuating another type of attack. We had another 60% who said it was at least somewhat likely that there would be another attack within the next couple of weeks. So I think all in all, Americans have all along not been sanguine that the U.S. might be able to avoid another tragic attack of the kind, obviously, that we've been warned to by the government today. One final point. Trust in government. We're going to be hearing from government officials in just a moment to do what's right. That really skyrocketed after 9/11. Those were historic highs, about 60%. Back down now, but Kira, 46%, about half of Americans say they trust the government to do what's right. Not huge numbers, but on a relative basis, that's certainly higher than we had before 9/11. Kira, that's an update from the people's perspective. Back to you.
Well, when you were putting this all together, Frank, any surprises?
Well, the surprise for a lot of people was that not as much has changed over the last year as people perhaps had anticipated. One example I didn't mention was religion. Everybody thought Americans became vastly more religious after 9/11. Pews were filled and what have you. But all of our indicators show since 9/11, as an example, Americans that have attended church, and that's what I'm showing you here, has actually been fairly constant and didn't change all that much after this little uptick right at September 11th. So to me, the surprise, Kira, is that in general, Americans have not changed as much as we might have expected in terms of at least their daily lives.
Frank Newport, our editor-in-chief of the Gallup poll. Thanks, Frank. And if you're just tuning in, the government is placing Americans on higher state of alert for possible attack of terrorists. We have now here in the United States been moved from elevated to high on the Homeland Security Advisory System. That is just one step below the highest that you can go, the severe level. We are expecting a news conference from the Justice Department. Attorney General John Ashcroft, also Homeland Security Director Tom Ridge, and FBI Director Robert Mueller will be stepping up to the podium to tell all of us, inform all of us what this means for us and what we need to do to protect ourselves and our families. Stay tuned. We're going to take a quick break. We'll be right back.
In the 1860s, we began connecting a continent, building a network so powerful it would transport an entire nation into the future. I guess you could say we've been online for the last 140 years.
Someone asked me once if I had my shirt special made. I told them I got mine like everybody else at Tractor Supply. The Wrangler jeans, Carhartt coats and workwear, Walls coveralls, plus clothes for the whole family. There's just no place that fits my life better than Tractor Supply. Heck, it's even where I go to get socks.
Tractor Supply. For 1 acre or 1,000, we'll help you get the job done.
Got a hot tip from my broker today.
Yeah, what is it?
Tacoma car.
I got that same tip from my broker yesterday.
I got that same hot tip from my broker last week.
Me too.
Me too.
Me too.
Me too.
There's never been a better time for Charles Schwab. At Schwab, we don't give hot stock tips. Our expert advice is based on research grounded in facts, not hype. And as always, designed for individual investors. To learn more, call 1-800-4SCHWAB.
A CNN exclusive, inside information about Osama bin Laden on 9/11. His bizarre reaction, his chilling gestures to his inner circle. I'm Wolf Blitzer. Join me for this exclusive bin Laden on 9/11 today, 5 p.m. Eastern on CNN.
If you're just tuning in to CNN, breaking news. We've been following it in the past hour and a half or so. Our threat status has been elevated. What does it mean to you? Here's exactly what it means. We have moved from elevated to high alert on the Homeland Security Advisory System. The government's terror alert code is what we're talking about. Stepped up from yellow to orange, just one level below severe, the highest that you can go. The government is placing Americans on this higher state of alert for possible attacks by terrorists. We have confirmed credible threats overseas, not yet here in the United States, but as you can imagine, government officials taking all precautions to protect Americans during this time, this very volatile time as September 11th approaches. We're going to head to the Pentagon where Barbara Starr is standing by. She's got more on what the military is doing or preparing for this elevated alert and what steps they are taking to, of course, protect Americans as we approach the 11th. Barbara.
Yes, Kira, good afternoon. Well, we've learned in the last few minutes here at the Pentagon, as part of what is called prudent planning and precautionary measures against this heightened state of alert, the Pentagon is now considering, no decision has been made, but is considering whether to put live fire ordnance on those air defense systems that have now been deployed around Washington, as we have told you since late yesterday. These are air defense missile systems on vehicles and shoulder fired. We have them sitting outside the Pentagon this afternoon here, and a number of other locations in Washington which the Pentagon does not want to publicly discuss. What we are told is up until now this has been just an exercise, no live fire, no ordnance on any of those launchers. But this afternoon, because of this heightened state of alert, The Pentagon is now actively considering and expects to make a decision in the next several hours about whether to put missiles on those launchers. Again, no final decision. It is being characterized as prudent planning as part of this heightened state of alert. Now, as far as the U.S. military goes overseas, we now know that in the Central Command, which is the Persian Gulf region, the area of very heightened tension, all U.S. military facilities in the Central Command Persian Gulf region have gone to Condition Charlie. This is an elevated state of security precautions at U.S. military bases. In Bahrain, though, they have gone now from Charlie to Condition Delta, we are told. That is the very highest state of alert. That, of course, is the condition that U.S. military forces found themselves in the very moments after the attacks on September 11th. In other places around the world of less concern, military forces are below that at Condition Bravo. All of this is being characterized to us at the moment as part of prudent planning, precautions. They are particularly concerned, we are told, out in Southeast Asia. Of course, the embassy in Jakarta has been closed. They're also very concerned in Bahrain. And again, that is the area where today U.S. forces are on the highest state of force protection alert. Kara?
Barbara Starr from the Pentagon, thank you so much. We're going to move it back to Justice Correspondent Kelly Arena. She's been bringing us more from there as we await a live news conference out of the Justice Department. Kelly, what's the update?
Well, Kara, here's what we know so far. The threat level, as we have heard, is moving from yellow to orange, which is a high state of alert, that there is credible and specific information that has come in through a variety of intelligence means suggesting that an attack could be imminent on U.S. targets in Southeast Asia. We do know that several U.S. facilities in Malaysia, Indonesia, Pakistan, Vietnam, Cambodia, and Bahrain have been closed for all parts of this week. Those include embassies and consulates in those areas. The intelligence information, though, that has come in does not point to, according to officials, a target here in the United States. However, out of an abundance of caution, those officials tell us that this decision was made to elevate the threat level domestically as well. My colleague Jean Meserve has also been told by her sources that there is also possibility of secondary attacks, possibly carried out by suicide bombers in undisclosed locations. Those may be separate from areas in Southeast Asia. This information has been linked directly to Al-Qaeda, that through a variety of means of gathering intelligence, whether that's through intercepts or picking up conversations or satellite photos or human intelligence that is all being gathered and culled together to try to figure out what the threat level is regarding U.S. interests not only here but overseas as well. As you see on our screen, we are waiting to hear from the Attorney General, the Director of Homeland Security, and FBI Director Robert Mueller. They will brief us and hopefully provide a much more elaborate amount of information regarding the types of information that have come in. Of course, there are some security concerns, so in some areas they may be vague, but we are hoping that they will at least be able to put us at ease somewhat in verifying for us what we are being told by sources, that there is nothing that pertains to U.S. targets, nothing that is supposed to be happening on U.S. soil. I will point out one caveat, though, and many sources today have repeated this, that intelligence information that came in last year at this time, pre-9/11, also pointed to a possible attack on overseas targets. Instead, we did see the devastating attacks here in the United States. That is one of the reasons we're seeing the threat level here domestically upped one to a high state of alert, just to be as secure as we possibly can be, Kira.
And you bring up a good point. I mean, that brings up the discussion of intelligence chatter, Kelly, and talk among Al-Qaeda operatives about possible attacks and this translating process. We'll talk more about that, but right on time, as we planned here, live to the Justice Department for more on the stepped-up terror alert code.
Good afternoon. I'm pleased to welcome you here today. I want to express my appreciation to Governor Tom Ridge, who is the advisor to the President for Homeland Security, for being here, and to the Director of the FBI, Bob Mueller, for being here. The United States government has concluded, based on analysis and specific intelligence of possible attacks on U.S. interests overseas, to call government, law enforcement, and citizens, both at home and overseas, to a heightened state of alert. After conferring with the Homeland Security Council, the recommendation has been made to increase the national threat level currently classified at elevated risk to high risk. The President has accepted this recommendation. The U.S. intelligence community has received information based on debriefings of a senior al-Qaeda operative of possible terrorist attacks timed to coincide with the anniversary of the September 11th attacks on the United States. Information indicates that al-Qaeda cells have been established in several South Asian countries in order to conduct car bomb and other attacks on U.S. facilities. These cells have been accumulating explosives since approximately January of 2002, this year, in preparation for these attacks. The U.S. intelligence community has also received information that one or more individuals in the Middle East are preparing for a suicide attack or attacks against U.S. interests. At this time, we have no specific information as to where these attacks might occur. The U.S. intelligence community has concluded that the most likely attacks of al-Qaeda attacks, the most likely targets of al-Qaeda attacks, are the transportation and energy sectors and facilities or gatherings that would be recognized worldwide as symbols of American power or security. Examples of such symbols are U.S. military facilities, U.S. embassies, and national monuments. In addition, U.S. intelligence has concluded that lower-level al-Qaeda operatives may view the September 11th anniversary as a suitable time to lash out in even small strikes to demonstrate their worldwide presence and resolve. Accordingly, widely dispersed, unsophisticated strikes are possible as well. The specificity of some of the information and analysis has contributed to the decision to close 4 U.S. embassies in Southeast Asia and to elevate our security at all overseas diplomatic and military facilities. The increased threat level is based on specific intelligence received and analyzed by the full intelligence community. This information has been corroborated by multiple intelligence sources. Last year at this time, United States intelligence discerned similar patterns of terrorist threat reporting overseas. In addition, other recent events parallel terrorist activity that occurred in the weeks prior to last year's attacks. I want to emphasize that the recommendation made today was not made to move to the highest level of alert, an action that would have been triggered by specific, credible intelligence and analysis pointing toward an imminent attack on the United States homeland. At this time, most intelligence focuses on possible attacks on U.S. interests overseas. As Attorney General, I have directed the Joint Terrorism Task Forces nationwide. There are Joint Terrorism Task Forces all across America in the various FBI district offices. I have directed that they coordinate their local response with U.S. attorneys and local anti-terrorism task forces. In addition, I have directed that all relevant information be shared with the Joint Terrorism Task Forces in order for federal officials to work effectively and cooperatively with state and local officials. As we have been forced to do in the past, today we once again call on the American people to remain alert but defiant in the face of this new threat. We are not recommending that events be canceled, nor do we recommend that individuals change domestic travel plans or that the federal workforce not report for duty. We are not making those recommendations. We ask that Americans both at home and abroad mark the anniversary of last year's savage attacks with a heightened awareness of their environment and the activities occurring around them. This call, which Americans have heard before, is based on specific intelligence that heightened awareness and readiness deters terrorism. Each of us has the ability to increase the security that we need. Security for ourselves, security for our families, and security for our communities. Today we call on Americans to exercise this responsibility with special care and vigilance. Now Governor Ridge will discuss actions which will and can be taken in response to this new information. Governor Tom Ridge.
Thank you. Thank you, General. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. As the Attorney General has announced, we are now at high risk of a terrorist attack, where now we are at level orange. This heightened threat level has been or is being communicated to local and state law enforcement, federal agencies, members of Congress, governors, state homeland security advisors, and representatives of the private sector. The nation's Homeland Security Advisory System provides a national framework to inform and facilitate decisions appropriate to different levels of government and to private citizens, be it at a workplace or at home. The system couples the threat level with protective measures that will be taken to reduce our country's vulnerabilities. Specific protective measures will be taken by all federal agencies as a result of the decision to raise the threat level to reduce vulnerabilities. All federal agencies had provided to the Office of Homeland Security the protective measures that they had been prepared to adapt to the threat advisory system by the end of August. And included among some of those that these agencies will consider taking in response to the elevation of the threat will be additional security personnel at federal facilities. At the very least, we want to ensure that security is more visible as a part of deterring terrorist activity. We give them, depending on the department and the area they are attempting to secure, they may engage in increased surveillance or counter-surveillance operations, may make adjustments as to the number of entry points into buildings, and if there are strict security procedures associated with access, we're going to encourage everyone to make sure that they enforce them to the very letter of the law, no exceptions. There may be some barriers erected to alter some of the traffic flow. There may be more frequent inspections of people or cars entering federal facilities. These are just some of the examples of the extra steps that are and will be taken by all federal agencies, and I might add that in talking with several governors and Homeland Security advisors within the past half hour, some states and organizations in response to the threat advisory system had already prepared different protective measures that they would embark upon if we were to raise the level of threat.
One of the most important news conferences to bring you at this time, and unfortunately we're having some technical problems, some satellite problems, but what I can tell you so far, okay, we've got it back, let's tune in.
Critical infrastructure will be taking action as well. For individual Americans, for every citizen, we know this is a very sobering announcement. Just as federal, state, and local officials are taking precautions, we certainly recommend and think there are some common sense measures that would enhance their security, and just some common sense precautionary things they should do as well. I know we've called on them before, but the Attorney General, the FBI Director, and I see on a fairly regular basis what happens with citizen involvement when they are extra vigilant, extra careful, when they become very alert to suspicious activity. We're going to call on them to maintain that high level of awareness. As the Attorney General said, be alert but be defiant. Let's make sure that every individual citizen who sees something suspicious reports it to either the Joint Terrorism Task Force or the local law enforcement. Parents may want to have a communication plan and talk to their children and their family about the significance of September 11th and about the possibility that those who would do us harm may choose that date or any time around the commemorative period to do us harm again. We would encourage employers and employees to know their own emergency plans, to review them. We'll talk to the governors and the Homeland Security advisors to put some of their facilities on alert, on call. Again, there are a lot of very practical, common sense measures that we will be encouraging and basically giving some direction to the states and locals to take. Now, beyond these very, very important steps, our advice to America as we engage the local law enforcement, the state law enforcement, the private sector, as we engage everyone who has critical responsibilities to reduce vulnerabilities and protect our homeland, our advice to America is to continue with your plans. If your travel is in your plans, attendance at a public event is in your plans, we would like you to proceed, to do as you had planned to do, but be wary and be mindful that because of the specific information that we have, that very consistent with the pattern of intelligence activity that was detected prior to 9/11, that the recommendation was made to raise the level of alert. I might add that I don't think America needs to be reminded that we are at war. However, this announcement is a reminder that there are people around the world who would do us harm. And our response is to continue to be America, but to be alert, to be vigilant. We have persevered through this. We'll persevere now, and ultimately we will prevail. Thank you.
General, is there any intelligence to suggest that these any attacks are planned domestically, or is the concern primarily overseas?
I would say that the most recent intelligence, which has prompted us to issue this change in our status, has focused primarily overseas. And frankly, part of our interpretation, or part of the analysis of that, is that that's very similar to the circumstances that existed a year ago. Yes, sir.
It seems like, with the timing of this this announcement, was there new information that came into that you came into knowledge of, or is this based on just an analysis, continuing analysis of information that's been out there for so long?
Well, in a way, the answer is yes. New information has fed into an analytic structure, which has made us take very seriously both the new information and the analysis, which leads us to this conclusion. So information has become available very recently, which together with the analysis of general circumstances and the situation leads us to make this change. Yes, sir.
General, how likely do you think that given the significance of this date, that there will be a terrorist attempt, whether successful or not? Do you expect that something will happen tomorrow?
Well, we really hope that by being alert and by having elevated security that we default the attempt of any terrorist activities. The primary aspiration that we have is to prevent terrorist attacks. And we believe that state and local law enforcement, federal authorities, the citizens of this nation working together are the best effort we can make for prevention. So there is an anomaly here, that if we are most successful with this announcement, we will prevent the attacks which might otherwise exist. And we think that would be a wonderful outcome, sir.
Some of the information from senior al-Qaeda operatives which you've operated on in the past and put out alerts have proven to be nothing's happened, and so the question has arisen whether or not these al-Qaeda operatives have the opportunity to sort of scare us or jerk our chain, and obviously you have to consider that in each case. Is there something different this time?
Well, we believe this to be credible information, and the analysis that has been undertaken by the intelligence agencies leads us to conclude that the steps we are taking are appropriate steps in the national interest. Yes, sir.
General Ashcroft, you said this was from a senior al-Qaeda operative. Can you discuss who that person is and give us any indication of where they're being held and what kind of information they provide?
No. Thank you.
General Ashcroft, you said you don't want to cancel events or people should go about daily lives. Did you at all consider looking at canceling events, and what made you decide not to do that? And how close did you come to the decision of maybe canceling some events?
Well, we believe that there is an elevated risk, and we think the best way to help guard against that risk becoming a reality is to share with the American people, and particularly the law enforcement community of the United States and those who have responsibility for defending our infrastructure, the information that's appropriate in that risk to prevent these activities. I don't believe that the analysis or the information has led us at any time to consider the cancellation of events. If we believe that was appropriate, we would not hesitate to do so, yes.
General, how long do you expect this new elevated status to continue?
You know, if we had the ability to define the times at which risks existed, we would just define the time as 0 and not have them. That's just another way of saying that the assessment of the risk will define the duration at which time we assign this level of risk in terms of public awareness. And we'll constantly be reassessing and pursuing the leads that come from the kind of information we've received, with a view toward the evaluation of where we are and at what level the risks exist. Obviously, we'd love to see events transpire in such a way as to demonstrate a substantially reduced risk, but we're not at that point yet. Yeah.
Okay, you mentioned energy and transportation as two vulnerable sectors. Can you be more specific? And why are those two sectors?
Well, we know historically that transportation has been a dramatic way in which the terrorist community has sought to impose its will as opposed to the values expressed in the cultures of freedom. Whether you're talking about the public transportation of buses and car bombs in the Middle East, or you're talking about the utilization of aircraft in the United States. They're symbolic, they're high profile, they're those kinds of things. And those things that relate to the success and survival of our culture are things that are obvious targets. I think if you all cared to supplement my answer there, I'd be happy to have you do so, but that's what I could say in response to that question.
I think, first of all, there had been a heightened sense of awareness that I think that was occurring within the private sector as well at the state and local level, just because of the significance that this country places on the public events tomorrow. And there have been several discussions about the importance of the ceremonies tomorrow as we remember, but also the possibility, although not based on any credible information, human instincts as they are, I think most Americans concluded even in their own mind that if you were thinking like a terrorist, then perhaps coming back again over the same date might be something you'd want to do. Now, we don't believe that they do anything other than operate when they're ready. No particular symbolism, no particular urgency attached to a symbolic date, But when you attach the symbolic date with the specific information that has been corroborated, coupled with a similar pattern of activity almost a year ago, you put those three things together and you say, for the time being, we best raise the level of awareness in this country. We have continued to make improvements in the transportation community, particularly with an eye toward aviation, and there'll be certain things that will be done we can't share with you publicly with regard to aviation, but every air marshal available will be available and flying over the next several days. It's just one of the responses that we're going to undertake as we elevate the threat level.
General Ashcroft, you mentioned car bombs. Is that pretty much the worst case scenario, or is there concern, particularly on this date, of a terrorist action that might have far greater destruction?
Well, I think we are very concerned about a full range of terrorist activities. One of the characteristics of the pre-9/11 period from a year ago was that there was a lot of traffic, if you will, that related to conventional terrorist activities. And yet, very shortly thereafter, or in the virtual same time frame, dramatically new, unheard of activities were engaged in. So we believe that we know from our intelligence activities that have been well reported that the terrorist community has been very active in a wide variety of terrorism potentials. And while car bombs are a very significant part, car bombs, truck bombs, explosive devices, we also know that the terrorist community has been interested, and Al-Qaeda in specific, and their associates have been interested in a wide range of terrorist devices. I think they're well understood. I don't mean to, if I made any specification today, it would not be for purposes of associating them with the elevated alert today, but we have seen that the terrorist community has done research in biological, evil biology, evil chemistry, in the dispersion of radiological contaminants and the like, and those have been the subject of previous endeavors. And frankly, when we elevate this alert, we want to remain cognizant of the fact that we're dealing with a complex capacity, with an organization of international reach, and whose, while we have improved our capacity to defend immeasurably, and while we have impaired their capacity in some measure, we also realize that they still have the capacity to operate.
Last question. Your concern is mainly targets, U.S. targets overseas. By waiting until the day before the anniversary, are you not cutting it kind of close in terms of the preparation that Americans overseas or U.S. corporations or others overseas could be doing for the planning?
Well, I think I want you all to be cognizant of what prompted this change. And I hope that we've made it clear that this change is based on an analysis of intelligence, that some of which very recently became available, which prompted us to work rapidly to make this change. And we have seen a rather prompt response to this by our own State Department in its activities regarding its embassies in various settings around the world. And we'll do everything we can to give the American people, both at home and abroad, a level of notice which will allow them to maximize their capacity to make the adjustments that are appropriate and necessary.
General, when you say recent, do you mean hours? Do you mean days?
Yes. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Which one? Which one?
Well, within the last 24 hours, we have had additional information that's been very, very valuable to us and significant. Thank you.
If you If you're just tuning in to CNN, you're watching breaking news. We've been following the terror alert code, which has been moved from, or elevated rather, to high alert, just one below severe, the highest that it can go. You'd been listening to John Ashcroft, Attorney General, also Tom Ridge, Director of Homeland Security, as they address reporters and Americans watching this news conference live on CNN. The good news is, even though the terror alert code has been elevated a level, John Ashcroft making it very clear that he wants Americans to go on with their everyday lives as they plan on doing so with regard to events and travel and going to work on September 11th. We're going to bring in our John King from the White House. He's also monitoring, or was monitoring, this news conference. Brings us more information. John, I know you have more information about the Vice President and how he's been in a secret location, but I find it very interesting in that the event that he's canceling tonight, yet John Ashcroft and Tom Ridge coming out and telling all of us to go on with life in normal ways.
Kira, a very different set of what they call continuity of government protocols when it comes to the safety and the security of the President and the Vice President. A lot to process from that news conference. Let's give a bit of new information to our viewers as well. We know the President signed off on this morning after a presentation from the CIA Director George Tenet. Our David Enser reporting that this new information from a senior al-Qaeda operative does not come from a name that has become familiar in recent months. Abu Zubaydah is a senior al-Qaeda official in U.S. custody. David Enser reporting that this is new information from another senior al-Qaeda operative who is in the custody of another nation, a friendly government, who, as the Attorney General said just as he walked out of the room, in the past 24 hours or so has passed on new information to his government, to the government in which he is in the custody, which has then passed it on to the United States. And after analyzing that information, the CIA obviously deems this threat as quite credible. As you noted, the Attorney General and the Homeland Security Director saying everyday Americans should go about their lives. The ceremonies planned across the country tomorrow are not being canceled because they do not believe the greatest risk is here in the United States. But Vice President Cheney, because of this increased threat level, has changed his routine. The Vice President stayed last night at a secure location. He did not go to a public event with the President last night because those security protocols say the President and the Vice President should not be together at the same time. We are told the Vice President has sent a videotape to a group he was supposed to address here in Washington tonight, and he has already left the White House grounds to go once again to that secure and undisclosed location. And Kira, all of this playing out, a great deal of focus in recent days on the President's lobbying effort to build a new coalition for a future front in the war on terrorism, confronting Saddam Hussein, a telling, compelling reminder again today that the first front of that war is still being fought against the al-Qaeda network. That was one of the issues we discussed with the President's National Security Advisor, Condoleezza Rice, as part of our own September 11th anniversary coverage 1 year later. Condoleezza Rice telling CNN much progress has been made in dismantling al-Qaeda, but she also acknowledges much work still to be done.
Right now, we're in a phase in which we are helping others to root out al-Qaeda and associated organizations. It's also a time when we are dealing with the fact that they scattered into other places a little bit like roaches. And so we're in a hunting phase of having to hunt them down. But I think the best news is that this coalition of civilized nations is so broad, and the intelligence and law enforcement network so broad, that we have a lot of partners in this effort.
One of those partners passing this new information on to the United States, this threat that has forced the United States to lift the threat, the level, the assessment of the threat of domestic terrorism here in the United States. Again, though, officials stressing, based on everything they have before them, they believe the threat is focused on U.S. installations overseas, but because they thought that 1 year ago on September 10th, they have decided to put people on alert here in the United States as well, out of an abundance of caution. Kira?
John King at the White House. Thanks, John. Meanwhile, we are awaiting words from the President of the United States. We are told that he is at the Afghan embassy in Washington, D.C. We are waiting for him to come out and address reporters. What could he talk about? A number of things. We're hoping possibly Iraq, his Iraq strategy, the war on terror, homeland defense, and even more importantly, what we have just learned, and that is the terror alert code being stepped up from yellow to orange. Once again, we are on high alert here in the United States as September 11th approaches. Live from Starts right now.
America on alert. The nationwide terror state of alert jumps from elevated to high.
The U.S. intelligence community has received information based on debriefings of a senior al-Qaeda operative of possible terrorist attacks timed to coincide with the anniversary of the September 11th attacks on the United States.
Targeting Saddam. Tough talk from a key U.S. ally.
And let it also be clear that should the will of the UN be ignored, action will follow.
Exclusive new details on what Osama bin Laden did on September 11th.
When the second tower is hit, bin Laden again prays and weeps, shouting Allah Akbar. Then he lifts 3 fingers. It becomes clear to the people in the room that he's signaling a third attack has become.
D-Day for America's best-known homemaker.
It seems like it's a case of insider trading that Ms. Stewart very well, can be, very well might be indicted. In fact, potentially convicted of a criminal offense.
CNN's live from New York, Washington, Qatar, and other datelines around the world.
It's 2 p.m. here in the East, 11 a.m. out West. Hello, everyone. I'm Kira Phillips. Also this hour, President Bush huddles with allies on what to do about Saddam Hussein. We hear more about the president's Iraq strategy, the war on terror, and homeland defense. Any moment now, Mr. Bush is expected to make comments at the Afghan embassy in Washington. We'll have live coverage. But first, this news alert. One day before the first anniversary of the September 11th attacks, Homeland Security officials are raising the nationwide terror state of alert. We are now to level orange. That means security officials are concerned there is a high risk of terrorist attacks on U.S. soil. Security officials at airports across the country have increased their alert status. They are now on a heightened state of alert. That call for increased vigilance extends to U.S. interests overseas as well. Attorney General John Ashcroft says all such diplomatic and military facilities are on increased alert and have stepped up security. Citing concern over terrorist threats overseas, 2 U.S. embassies in Asia are closing their doors. The embassy in Jakarta, Indonesia closed today. The one in Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia, will close tomorrow. Officials are also warning Americans worldwide to be vigilant and cautious. Reported plans to bomb U.S. and Israeli embassies in Manila have officials there on red alert. Philippine authorities are investigating the alleged al-Qaeda bombing plot. Vice President Cheney is back to spending his nights in a secure, undisclosed location. Officials call it an overabundance of caution in line with the heightened alerts surrounding the 9/11 anniversary. As if the New York Fire Department didn't suffer enough last September 11th, hundreds of firefighters are reportedly off active duty because of lung problems resulting from 9/11 rescue work. The New York Times says the department is bracing for a wave of disability retirements. And Martha Stewart has another 30 minutes to answer questions from the House Energy and Commerce Committee, or else. The or else could include a congressional subpoena or referral to the Justice Department for possible prosecution. At issue is Stewart's sale of stock in a friend's company just before it plummeted. We begin with the government's decision to ratchet up the status of the terror threat and terror precautions in the hours leading up to September 11th. Let's get straight to David Ensor. He's in Washington. David.
Kara, intelligence officials tell me that first and foremost, the information upon which this new heightened alert is based comes from a senior al-Qaeda official who has been in the hands of another government for a couple of months now. This official has only recently begun to tell things that are believed to be useful to the government that's holding him, and of course that information is being shared with the United States. Intelligence officials say they've cross-checked it in recent days with other information they had, and they now believe he's giving them specific and credible information about possible threats to U.S. targets. Now, as you reported earlier, the concern is particularly high in Southeast Asia, where U.S. embassies and military installations are on a heightened state of alert. But there's also concern about the possibility of low-level attacks really anywhere in the world, from car bombs down to suicide attacks, the feeling that lower-level al-Qaeda members may be looking for a way, even without organized orders from on high, to commemorate the anniversary tomorrow. So a heightened state of alert in the United States based on this intelligence information coming first and foremost from this one senior al-Qaeda official. We're told it is not someone we've heard of before, not Abu Zubaydah, not some of the others that we know publicly announced to have been either in U.S. or friendly hands. This is another al-Qaeda official. His name has not yet been made public. Kira?
David, another question for you. When John Ashcroft and Tom Ridge held this news conference just moments ago, the reporter asked John Ashcroft specifically, do we need to worry about an attack on September 11th? Are you expecting an attack on September 11th? And John Ashcroft paused. He didn't say yes, he didn't say no. He just said, we really hope we default any attempt of terrorist activity. Why is he not being more specific?
The reason is they don't have specific information about an organized al-Qaeda attack on a specific target on 9/11. But there is intelligence information suggesting that some lower-level members may be seeking perhaps less sophisticated sorts of attacks as their own personal statement of commemoration of the day. So there's concern that there might be lower-level attacks, that there might be attacks organized by an individual or a very small cell, and that could be anywhere, including the United States. That's why this heightened state of alert, Kara.
He did make the point of small strikes could be expected, not just large ones. David Ensor, thank you so much. Kelly Arena, Justice correspondent, also working this story. She brings us more out of Washington, D.C. also. Kelly.
Kira, following up on that last point, the Attorney General did point out that the reason that the threat level went up to high but not the highest, which is severe, is because there is no specific or credible information pointing to an attack on U.S. soil. However, if you remember, just about this time last year, the information that was gathered by the intelligence community that did indicate a possible terrorist attack on U.S. interest overseas culminated with an attack on U.S. soil. And so out of an abundance of caution, we are seeing the threat level, at least domestically, raised as well. The Attorney General went on to describe a little bit about the information that was provided by the al-Qaeda operative, and that included information about cells in several Southeast Asian countries that have been gathering explosives since January. He talked about other information that came in that suggested there could be separate suicide bombings at undisclosed locations that could be outside of the Southeast Asian region. He talked about the fact that even though al-Qaeda is not known for attacking around anniversaries or symbolic dates, that this could be seen as a time to lash out, that it was discussed that 9/11, the anniversary of 9/11, could be a time to lash out, to show the United States that al-Qaeda did have resolve and a commitment to continue to destroy U.S. interests. He talked also, as David mentioned, about possible unsophisticated attacks by individual cells or sympathizers, also leading to the warning, the domestic warning here in the United States. But in light of all this, the Attorney General was asked, what do Americans do as a result of this new elevated threat level? And his answer was, be vigilant, but go about your business as usual. Here's what he had to say.
Today, we once again call on the American people to remain alert but defiant in the face of this new threat. We are not recommending that events be canceled, nor do we recommend that individuals change domestic travel plans or that the federal workforce not report for duty. We are not making those recommendations. We ask that Americans both at home and abroad mark the anniversary of last year's savage attacks with a heightened awareness of their environment and the activities occurring around them. This call, which Americans have heard before, is based on specific intelligence that heightened awareness and readiness deters terrorism.
Officials did tell the Americans traveling overseas to be ultra cautious, and there have been some closings of embassies and U.S. consulates in a variety of countries, including Malaysia, Indonesia, Pakistan, Vietnam, Cambodia, and Bahrain. So underscoring here, information coming in from an al-Qaeda operative that was corroborated by several of the means of intelligence gathering, which led to the elevated state of alert that we are currently in. Kira.
Kelly, another point Homeland Security Director Tom Ridge brought up, he was giving some other words of advice with regard to work facilities, saying adjust emergency procedures. I thought that was interesting, talking about securing the exits, making sure that large businesses do know how to get out in case something gets down. What more can you tell us about that?
Well, state and local governments each have plans that they need to put in place as a result of this new state of alert, and also corporations, which obviously are on the front line here, have their own plans in place. But basically, you have two situations here. You have your security measures that are preventative, and then you have your contingency measures that come in place after the fact. So you have a lot of coordination that will go on today, talking about a variety of actions to take. But I am told the President is speaking right now. Let's go to him.
Okay, Kelly.
Thank you for coming. I just, please be seated. I had the opportunity of meeting with distinguished members of the Arab American and Muslim American communities. I want to thank you all so very much for coming to share with me your thoughts. Like all Americans, they're proud of our country. They're proud of our military. They're proud of our allies for working together to free Afghanistan. They will never forget the joy of the Afghan people who were liberated. They appreciate the fact that we worked in concert to destroy terrorist training camps in Afghanistan so that those terrorists might not hurt others. They wanted to come with me to show their solidarity with the people of Afghanistan and to show that America has a vibrant and important and dynamic Muslim faith tradition. I appreciate so very much Zaid, the president of the American Arab Anti-Defamation League, for being here. Mr. Ambassador, thank you and your sweet wife for having us here. Ambassador is a fabulous story. He's an American citizen, renounced his citizenship in order to become the ambassador of Afghanistan to serve this nation. And I appreciate that. Appreciate your leadership. I want to thank Andrew Natsios, who's with us today. He's doing a fine job of helping people in need around the world. I want to thank, where's Zal? There he is. Zal, thanks for coming. Zal Khalizad is a member of the National Security Council and very much involved with our efforts to help Afghanistan. It's important for our fellow Americans to understand that Americans of Muslim faith share the same grief that we all share of what happened to our country. That they're just as proud of America as I am proud of America. That they love our country as much as I love our country. They share my profound belief that no American should be judged by appearance, by ethnic background, or by religious faith. I believe that strongly, and so do they. Bigotry is not a part of our soul. It's not going to be a part of our future. Sure, there may be some, but that's not the American way, and we must reject bigotry of all kinds in this great land. In order for us to reject the evil done to America on September the 11th, we must reject bigotry in all its forms. George Washington says America gives to bigotry no sanction, to persecution no assistance. And that is true today. We treasure our friendship with Muslims and Arabs around the world. 1 year ago, the people of Afghanistan lived under oppression. Their country was a haven for terror. Today, they're an emergency democracy. emerging democracy and building a better future. And we are proud to continue to stand by them and to stand with them. Americans are helping the people of Afghanistan in their time of hardship and need, and we will continue to do so. The United States has committed more than $700 million in aid to Afghanistan for food and seeds and roads and bridges, water and sanitation systems. I was most proud of the fact that American children from all walks of life contributed to the America's Fund for Afghan Children. It was such a strong statement of children uniting to help people in need. All Americans must recognize that the face of terror is not the true face of Islam. Islam is a faith that brings comfort to 1 billion people around the world. It's a faith that has made brothers and sisters of every race. It's a faith based upon love, not hate. As we mourn tomorrow, we must remember that our enemy is a radical network of terrorists, not a religion. That governments which support them are our enemies, not faithful Muslims who love their families, who yearn for a more peaceful and safe world for their children. Tomorrow, Americans of all faiths will come together in a spirit of unity and remembrance and resolve. I call on every American to uphold the values of America and remember why many have come here. In our war against terror, we must never lose sight of the values that makes our country so strong. The values of respect and tolerance. The value that we believe that everybody ought to worship the Almighty, however they so choose. Mr. Ambassador, thank you for letting me come by on the eve of this important day for our country. I'm honored to be here at your embassy.
Thank you very much, Mr. President.
May God bless you. May God bless Afghanistan. May God continue to bless America. I'll answer a few questions. Jennifer. Well, we take every threat seriously. The threats that we have heard recently remind us of the pattern of threats we heard prior to September the 11th. We have no specific threat to America, but we're taking everything seriously, obviously, and so therefore we have gone to a different level of concern, different threat level, which means our government will be providing extra security at key facilities, and that will be increasing surveillance. We'll do everything we can to protect the American people, and Americans need to go about their lives. They just need to know that that their government at the federal and state and local level will be on an extra level of alert to protect us. Heidi. You haven't asked a question in a while.
What do you think of the French President Chirac's idea to give Hussein a 3-week deadline to comply with weapons inspections?
I think, Heidi, I think it's important that so that you will pay attention to my speech on Thursday, that I reserve judgment about what may or may not be in my speech. He even got applause. He finally got a question and applause. I do. I'll have something to say, and obviously, and I look forward to speaking to that international body about how best we can work together to keep the peace, how best to make the world a more peaceful place. And so I hope you understand that I'll not reveal my speech ahead of time. I know that many are trying to find out what it is, but that's your job. My job's not to answer you. Katie, ABC.
Sir, if you decide on a military solution to Saddam Hussein, have you resigned to go through the UN Security Council, or are you determined to go it alone?
Katie, thank you for asking me about what's going to be in my speech tomorrow. Let me get to the UN and give what is an important speech for me. I'll make the case of how I think we ought to proceed and on how we work together to keep the peace. I'm going to the United Nations to give this speech for a reason, because I believe this is an international problem and that we must work together to deal with the problem. And I am also very mindful of my job as the American president to do everything we can to protect the American people from future attack. And I'm deeply concerned about a leader who has ignored the United Nations for all these years, has refused to conform to resolution after resolution after resolution, who has weapons of mass destruction. And the battlefield has now shifted to America, so there's a different dynamic than we've ever faced before, and I take these threats seriously. The most thing I take most seriously is my job to protect innocent life here on the homeland, and I will respond to this threat starting Thursday, and I look forward to the chance to do so. In the meantime, tomorrow is going to be a hard day for a lot of Americans. It's going to be a day of tears and a day of prayer, a day of national resolve. It also needs to be a day in which we confirm the values which make us unique and great. And that's one of the reasons I came here today, to be with friends, to assure all Americans that we will embrace those values. So thank you all for coming. God bless.
President of the United States addressing a number of issues after meeting with officials there at Afghanistan's embassy in Washington, D.C., touching on the state of Afghanistan since the war on terror began, also talking about remembering tomorrow, September 11th, and the values of America and how this war on terror is keeping those values strong. Also addressed the threat level raised from elevated to high, and of course a speech to the UN that will take place Thursday, specifically folks wanting to know about that strategy against Iraq and a possible war against Iraq. Our Kelly Wallace standing by live at the White House following the president, what he's been up to today, and also words from the Afghan embassy there. Kelly, what's your take?
Well, Kara, two things to point out. Number one, the reason the president wanted to go to the embassy of Afghanistan, it's a similar visit that he made a few days after the September 11th attacks, when he visited the Islamic Center in Washington, to get the message out that this war on terror is not a war against Islam, not a war against Muslims, that Arab Americans, Muslim Americans united with other Americans in this war. It's interesting, the president not wanting to talk at all about his speech on Thursday. Senior officials, though privately, are saying his message will be that Saddam Hussein is an outlaw regime, that he will outline the threat he believes Saddam Hussein poses to the U.S., the international community, and he will call on the UN to act, to enforce resolutions, to get weapons inspectors back inside the country. His message will be the UN must act. The implied suggestion there is if the international community does not act, the U.S. and others could then handle things on their own. And then finally, Kira, of course, the president, the first question, talking about this increase in the threat level. We know our senior White House correspondent John King, his sources saying that the president was advised about this increased information during a meeting Monday by his CIA director, George Tenet, that the president wanted more information, and then he got that information at a meeting this morning, and then he accepted the recommendation of CIA Director Tenet and his other advisors to go ahead and increase this threat level. The president saying they're seeing a lot of what they saw last year before the September 11th attacks. He said there's no specific threat when it comes to targets in the United States, but clearly a big concern for this administration about what could happen here and around the world, and that is why that threat level is increased. Kara.
Kelly Wallace at the White House. Thanks so much, Kelly, talking about the government placing Americans on higher state of alert for possible attacks by terrorists. Also on alert, the United States military. Barbara Starr at the Pentagon with more on that and what's happening here and overseas. Barbara?
Kara, yes, as we have talked about for the last day or so, there is an air defense exercise going on here in Washington, D.C. Now, that has involved the deployment of vehicles and launchers, unarmed radars and unarmed equipment around the Pentagon here and other locations around Washington that the Pentagon has declined to publicly name. What we are told is now the Pentagon, as part of this whole effort, is still considering whether or not to turn this air defense exercise into an air defense operation. And what that would mean, although no decision has been made at the moment, is that the ammunition, the missiles, the air defense surface-to-air missiles might now be placed more closely to the actual launchers in case tomorrow there is a situation and they want those missiles readily available. This entire debate is being discussed here at the Pentagon this afternoon at the very highest levels. We don't know how it's going to turn out. We don't know whether missiles will in fact be moved closer to the launchers. We don't know if they will actually be put, if this equipment will actually actively be armed. We simply don't know how the decision will be made and how far it will go, but it remains under very active discussion here this afternoon. Now, overseas, the military is also, as a result of all of this, on a much higher state of alert, especially in the Persian Gulf in Bahrain. The naval station at Bahrain, the headquarters of the 5th Fleet of the United States Navy, has now moved to condition Delta. That is the highest level that it could move to. That's where the U.S. military was right after September 11th. But we've spoken to officials very familiar with the security situation in Bahrain tonight, and they tell us that the base, that personnel are still moving in and out, that there is no complete lockdown of the base, and perhaps most importantly, as of right now, U.S. Navy ships have not been ordered out to sea. In previous instances of very high threats, the Navy has simply ordered all ships out to sea to get away from ports until things appear calmer. That has not happened so far. No aircraft have been launched. Everything appears to be under very high security, but relatively status quo out in Bahrain. We are also told that throughout the rest of the Central Command, the Persian Gulf and Middle East region, almost all U.S. military installations have also had their condition of force protection raised. They are now at condition Charlie. That is just under Delta, just under the highest level. All of this relates to restricting access on bases, putting a more secure situation around the perimeter, making sure that movement in and out of military bases is restricted. So all of that is underway. They feel that they are just simply taking very prudent precautions right now in the face of what the Attorney General had discussed earlier today. Kara?
Barbara Starr from the Pentagon, thank you. And if you're just tuning in, we are following the latest news, and that is Americans on a higher state of alert for possible attack by terrorists. We're on top of this story and bringing you the latest details as we get them from the Pentagon, from the Justice Department, from the State Department, letting you know what you need to do to remain secure as September 11th approaches. Main thing coming out of the White House, coming out of the State Department, go on with life as usual. Travel, go to events, just remain on high alert.